Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Chase, aka That Gay Jedi, and welcome to another video. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. I know there's a few of you who are new here, so I just wanted to say thank you for joining. And also, kind of bummed this might be the first upload you get from me, but I'm also proud of it because this is a conversation that needs to be had. And as That Gay Jedi, and just as a Star Wars fan, I think it's important to talk about, representation and when representation succeeds, and also when it flops. To be honest. For those who don't know, Tales of the Jedi is an animated short series created by Dave Filoni on Disney+. And the last episode of this series, titled Resolve, is based off of the same story told in the Ahsoka Tano novel written by E.K. Johnston. And before anyone says anything, there is a very recent interview with Dave Filoni in which he confirms with Nerdist that this is the same story. So I'll put that quote up here. Article will also be linked down below in case you want to read it. Yeah, so basically, same story told two different ways. One in publishing that's been around since 2016, and one through an animated short. And in those two versions of the same story, some of the central characters vary greatly, and it has caused a little bit of harm in the Star Wars fandom. And I'm just kind of here to lay it out and just sort of talk about it. And yeah, that's, I guess, as much of a backstory as you need, and let's get into it. Okay, so to give you sort of an idea as to where I'm coming from on this, I'm not really like angry or entitled or I'm frustrated, and it's saddening and it's a little bit maddening, but I'm not coming from that place when I'm making this video. I'm making this video because I just think it's a really important conversation to be had, and I think there's a lot of nuance to it, and I think that a lot of times on Twitter or in written media, it's a little bit hard to discuss those nuances. Also, by the way, feelings of anger and frustration and sadness and madness about all this are completely valid. And I want everyone watching that feels those feelings to know that that is valid. Anyways, as we continue the fight and hope for better and increased representation of people of color and of queer people and of all kinds, I think that this is just a really important topic to discuss. So to better explain sort of the issue at hand, let's just sort of talk about the Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston. It was published in 2016, shortly after Disney made the announcement that everything made in Star Wars, whether it be through publishing, video games, or movies or TV shows, all of it would be canon. So in the story, Ahsoka it's post-Order 66, and Ahsoka befriends and saves villagers from an Inquisitor, and those two friends are called Kaden and her sister Miara. And spoiler alert, at the end of the story, Kaden basically confesses romantic feelings towards Ahsoka. And this was and is a very big deal because basically it secures Kaden as sort of a very early form of canonical queer representation, and she has been, honestly, one of my favorite queer characters in Star Wars. I don't read a lot of Star Wars books, but I actually have read this one. So I can say that. She literally tells Ahsoka, "I could kiss you." And as the village is being evacuated, her and Ahsoka sort of share some physical intimacy and just sort of I don't know, just intimacy, whatever, however you want to interpret that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty undoubtable to me that Kaden is a queer character. She's a queer person. Obviously, there's a lot more wiggle room with Ahsoka. To me, she's always read as Ace, but whatever, that doesn't matter. That's not important right now. Now, in the Tales of the Jedi short, basically, all the events are the same. Everything happens. As Dave Filoni has confirmed, this is the same story. But the roles of Kaden and Miara are actually just two unnamed villagers, and they are literally called unnamed villagers in the show. So in my opinion, it's kind of safe to assume that these two characters replace or serve the same narrative function as Kaden and Miara in this short. Now, there's two really, really big issues with this when it comes to representation, because these unnamed characters are a sister and a brother, and they are significantly more white passing than described in the novel. Kaden is a queer black woman, and like I said, these two characters are white passing, to say the least. But I will say they are voiced by people of color. So yeah. Anyways, this is a huge, this is a whole other issue when it comes to representation and erasure of representation, or I guess at the very least, a decision not to have representation when it comes to characters of color that have been previously established in canon. I can only speak from the queer side of things, but I think that's really important to highlight. My friend Hope wrote a really amazing article that I will link below, and basically she also sort of brings together people of color in the Star Wars fandom who have spoken on this. So definitely be sure to check out Hope's article and all the included text about that erasure. But yeah, on top of that, we don't know these two unnamed characters' sexuality necessarily, but it's safe safe to assume, I mean, they're straight. And like, listen, I'm not asking for like them to put Kaden in this story and have her like make out with Ahsoka. I just think that like it's interesting that they chose to replace a canonically queer person of color. So yeah, I hope that all makes sense. But basically you can read the book, you can read summaries, or you can go watch the show. But that's the gist of the situation. And I just want to make it first and foremost very, very clear that I don't think this is like an issue of like canon rigidity or like me being hyper focused or anyone being focused on like canon versus non-canon and like continuity issues. To me, it's like the issue of actively saying no to the opportunity to have representation on screen. And what I mean by that is like publishing has historically, especially in Star Wars, been one of the only places that we can see ourselves in stories, we meaning queer people. And historically speaking, publishing has just like had the most representation, the most diverse representation when it comes to queer people and people of color and all kinds of representation. And like where I get honestly particularly bent out of shape about it is like, if publishing is where we are allowed to exist in Star Wars, like literally allowed to exist, which first of all, whoa. But if publishing is the only place in which we're allowed to exist and like see ourselves as like marginalized communities, I think it sends a really weird message to sort of like steamroll over that. And I honestly feel bad for like authors and like people in publishing because it just makes it like the optics of it kind of make it feel like publishing just like it always comes second. And I guess I don't like really mind that. Like I said, I don't necessarily read every Star Wars book ever, but I do mind it in terms of like completely ignoring representation that honestly like creates a lot of love and excitement and feelings of inclusion in Star Wars for fans of color and queer people. Like, so it's just to steamroll over that doesn't feel good. And to like turn the other way and decide not to put these characters in the story doesn't feel good. And it makes a lot of people upset. And like I said at the beginning of the video, those feelings are very upset. But it's also very strange too, because like Dave Filoni seems like a stand-up guy. He also talks about the importance of representation. So I don't really know what happened there, but that kind of leads me to my third point. I just wish that he would talk about this. Like, this isn't me demanding that he talks about it, but I really love the idea of him talking about it because at the end of the day, as I'm sure people who might not agree with me 100% have already been commenting, we don't have like a lot of information. Like there is a lot of like gray area, not a lot, but there's enough gray area and like enough holes in all of it where like a little bit more context and a little bit more like illumination would benefit everybody. I also just think it would be really nice of him to sort of like address sort of the pain that that decision caused, because that story, Ahsoka's story in the novel, is really important to a lot of people in terms of like being seen and being represented in Star Wars, which honestly rarely happens in even animation and especially not live action. So it's just yeah, it's caused a lot of pain, and it's also caused like a lot of like infighting in the fandom, and just sort of like it's started a lot of little fires. And I just wish that like I guess that Dave Filoni notices that and maybe talks about it at some point. I mean, I'm not asking them to reanimate the whole thing, but if they did, that'd be kind of lit. But I just wish like him as a creator and as like a really conscious creator, like he's like a very aware creator for the most part, to my understanding. And I wish that he would like, especially for like his character's sake, Ahsoka's sake, and like this story that he, you know, there's been so many, like when that book was coming out, there were so many stories about him like approving the book and approving the arc and improving like the skeleton of this story. And so it just, I would think that he would also want to sort of address it. And maybe he just doesn't know, maybe he hasn't, you know, heard yet, but that's why I think this is a very important conversation to have. It's not necessarily to like shame anyone or get like irrationally angry, but like first and foremost, like if you're a queer person or person of color and like it does make you feel those things, those are valid, because this sucks. Like it sucks. And it's just like puts a really bad taste in my mouth. But like I said, I just kind of wanted to hop on here and like talk about it. I think it's an important thing to discuss. Like at the very least, it's a conversation that we should be having in fandom, especially as, again, we like work towards and hope for increased representation in Star Wars. And not only increased representation, but like representation that could at least stay where it is and not be diminished, because oh boy, it definitely feels like that with this. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about all this down below in the comments. I'd really love to have a conversation and like, you know, get that going. Be sure to check out Molly's article down below. And also Alex and Molly from Star Wars Explained did a really wonderful live stream sort of talking about it. And I was really grateful to them for like spending a lot of time to talk about it with a platform as big as theirs. So shout out. Yeah, so check out those links down below. Thank you all so much for watching. It really means the world, and may the force be with you always.